Question.
Yes, sir.
Now, like, these him already on the list of potential projects. I mean, you don't know whether they're gonna make it or not.
Oh, absolutely not. Most of them won't. The state, when they spun this thing up, if my math serves me correctly, I think the balance was $17 billion worth of ideas. So that was,
And that's just for that's for the state of Florida. You have the other
Yeah.
5 states,
Yeah,
with
so-
equal amounts.
you
Well,
know, so-
my question is, I know it's a lot on there, but suppose you miss some and somebody come up with some now that, can you put one on there?
there's no, and you do not have to draw on this list. That's very, going to the state portal is not your requirement for your Maya.
Yeah, this list has nothing to do with
No.
what we locally want to do with our restore money. This was a window that was open at the time, and it was several years ago, and I thought of almost everything in a comprehensive, global way, because I wasn't sure at the time, this is probably 2 years ago, whether the window would ever close.
Right.
I didn't want to miss the window, so I realized the window is now open, but 2 years ago, I didn't know that. So I made a comprehensive list of, I had $30 million, I listed here $30 million for Oyster Bay rehabilitation. Do I have a plan for that? Absolutely not, but I knew, I felt I needed to get a number in there to
Right.
protect Franklin County's interests.
Right.
Let me just make one point. Some of these projects, that I've skimmed through them pretty thoroughly while we're sitting here talking. And one of the projects is, and this has just recently happened, so it's not something that's just 2 or 3 years ago. This is project's been added on every day because it's got the bluffs over there on St. Teresa.
Right, see?
It's got the 17,000 acres there. It's got, projects over there from, where was it right here? Let's see. Whom Cares is an incorporation out of North Miami Beach that wants some land bought over here west of Apalachicola. I mean, just kind of weird looking stuff,
So,
you know?
so going back to
Yeah.
the origin of
Whom
these,
Cares.
it was
Here it is.
wide open. Could be anything you were
And
thinking
and
about.
some of these projects have actually already been, are in the process of being completed.
Yeah, and some have been
So
adopted
just
by
because you got a
other.
list here doesn't mean that's the stuff they're gonna
Right.
send to us.
That's right.
Some of this stuff's being submitted and some of it's been paid for with different pots of money, state pots, different, NIFWIP. Some of these other people have already funded some of these projects and some of, so this is not projects that are being submitted to us to fund.
Correct.
This is just a list of projects that were put in.
It is a reference. Now, to give the process its appropriate due, by seeing these projects, and you are right, Commissioner, some of these projects have been picked up under NERDA, or NIFWIF, or other things that have started to take shape. The reason it is an important reference resource for you is there are times when you see that kind of momentum already, and you can look into it, and some of the counties are doing this, and appropriately so. You may look to see if you want to partner in that project because you get more effect. You get more bang for the buck in the end. The bottom line is this. Again, this is the rarest money of its kind that I would imagine you as a board of commissioners of Franklin County will ever see in this generation to handle. And the real test is, does the project, in your best estimation, the projects that you will go for, have the best chance of accomplishing the outcomes that you're after? And that's where you're gonna build your own project set internally.
Most of these come from Tallahassee or somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
everybody had the opportunity to submit something, and so again, when this first came out, not knowing if there was gonna be a closure of the date, I submitted things, comprehensively. I mean, I tried to cover
And
everything.
it's all right.
Well, I wanted to make sure that if there's an opportunity at some point in the future, someone will do something, that they didn't say, well, you never submitted anything, so, boy, I
Right.
shoved everything in there I could think of.
But I mean, you look at this, I mean, I'm just looking at the reality of everything. You look at this, the phased-in Bluffs of St. Teresa project preserves approximately 17,080 acres adjacent to Ball Point State Park, and it goes on. And it's through Apalachicola, Chipola rivers, Oclotney, St. Mark rivers. Franklin County is a county, 62,500,000, but it's presented before, in this package right here, from Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. This don't make no sense.
That's
Well-
already, I think that's already, just about complete.
Yeah,
The
and-
transaction is almost
And
complete.
so the same pool, Commissioner
Yeah.
Sanders, the same pool was used to, they took that original submission and they ran after the other restore pots that both the state controls or NIFWIP and NERDA have and have applied successfully in many cases their attempts to move into those resources.
Well, and see, this project right here that you're talking about, we had a visioning, session many years ago. And in the eastern part of the county, this is part of the property that we said was gonna be for future growth. Houses for our people to live in and all. And now they've taken 17,000 acres out of that without commenting or considering or contacting Franklin County. And so that's a real big problem to me because this, like I said, this is where we were gonna do some housing out there in the eastern part of the county to where we have people be able to live there because we don't have but this little strip along 98 for the land, because we're 87.5% owned by the state of Florida and federal government. So, it kind of like, it doesn't coincide with what the local government views are or intentions are, and I don't see how it can happen, but it does happen. So,
Yeah,
I just
Commissioner
hope,
Sanders, you're exactly right. So someone else has put in here, I've lost my place, 40,000 acres of land we purchased, all the St. Vincent Sound here. Someone else wants to buy all that. I mean, they're just,
and that's the one I was talking about, the monitoring and reducing mercury in the Apalachicola, Florida. The project scope is to acquire 41 acres of land in Franklin County that borders the Apalachicola watershed, and it goes on $7 million is that, but it's from that company, Whom Cares, out of North Miami Beach, Florida. So that makes you wonder. I mean, it's just, as I said before, it's weird.
A lot of this, are projects been submitted by a lot of different entities, but then you got a lot of people that, from the different agencies and everybody else that's got money, looks at these projects and they have priorities of how they wanna spend their money, so they go down through here and they see a project that matches and they go for it, because the project's been submitted by the Nature Conservancy or whatever, and they got the ability and the money, and that's the way they wanna use their money. They go in and pick these projects out, finance them, and start rolling the ball. So that's how we're getting to the point we're at now, where a lot of these projects are almost complete or already complete.
Yes, sir, and to that end, in that example that you gave, Commissioner Sanders, because it is a capital process, if the property is up for sale, there are multiple interests in either setting aside in permanent easement or conservation in perpetuity or economic development.
Yeah.
That's why the race is a bit on to
Well,
determine what's
and
one
Brian,
of
that's what happened. That's what happened. You got the different entities that this land is sold out to. So what was apparent 10 years ago may not be apparent now. And anyway, it's just the way it goes.
It go to the who know what buddy system. That's what it is.
You say that with a sage ring, so I'm assuming you know it.
Thank y'all for coming.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
very simple. Oh, Mr. Allen?
mine's pretty short this morning. First item isn't really restore related. I just want to inform the board that, I think you all have seen the letter already. Inform the board that last week, the board received a copy of the letter that Florida FDOT Secretary Jim Boxall wrote to FEMA requesting assistance on behalf of Franklin County. And I want to tell you, on my 29 years of the board, I've never seen such a strong letter written by a state agency on behalf of Franklin County. Hopefully it'll get some attention. The Secretary's letter was written on the same day that the county's letter to FDOT was written, where the county is asking FDOT to take over the Alligator Point Road. The board action of September 6th was to write a letter to the governor requesting that the state take over Alligator Point Road. Commissioner Sanders discussed the county's request with District Secretary Tommy Barfield, and it was Mr. Barfield who suggested the letter be written to him and that copies be sent to our elected officials. Commissioner Sanders and I discussed the letter, and then I wrote the letter to District Secretary Barfield for the chairman to sign. So this September 22nd letter to Mr. Barfield, with copies of the governor and others, is in the board files in lieu of a letter directly to the governor. That's what DOT recommended we do, and Commissioner Sanders will say that Mr. Barfield was supportive of our request. He understood that, that road condition is well beyond our ability to maintain it. He, though, is going out as a district secretary, I think, at the end of October, or sometime shortly. But we read the letter, DOT wrote their letter, and neither one has gotten a response back. So we're just waiting to see what happens. Number two, though, this is a long narrative that basically came out of the September 20th workshop that we had here, and so I just want to tell you what I've said and what I will say again to the consortium consultants. Number two, inform the board that on September 26th, I had a teleconference with the consortium consultants, ESA, regarding Franklin County's Pot 3 projects. And on October 10th, the consultants will be in Franklin County to discuss Pot 3 with me. The consultants are visiting every county in the consortium, as their goal is to make a presentation at the December, I think it's the third consortium meeting, on the status of county projects. While the consultants continue to develop the state expenditure plan, there has been no direction from the governor that he is going to support or approve what the consortium turns in. But without any other direction, all the counties are responding to the consultants' request for projects. So I'm doing the same. We're moving ahead as if we think the governor is going to support all this. On September 20th, at the Restore workshop, the board did discuss Pot 3 funds. I used that discussion as a basis for what I told the consultants, but since they are coming here on October 10th, I thought I would go over what I said with the board to make sure I'm accurately stating the board's opinion. So here's what I plan to say to the consortium consultants on October 10th. In keeping with the guidelines of Pot 3, where projects are limited to only three areas, environmental restoration, economic development, and infrastructure, Franklin County intends to spend 25% of the funds on infrastructure, and 25% is the cap, and then equally divide the remaining funds between environmental restoration and economic development. In terms of total money, if Franklin County receives its almost $12 million over 15 years, then we would have, using a percentage, $3 million for infrastructure projects, and $4.5 million for environmental restoration, and $4.5 million for economic development. The challenge, of course, is that this money will come in over 15 years, so the development of these projects will be over 15 years, if not longer. So what I did was I took some of the topics we talked about and I broke them down. So I just want to show you all this. So under infrastructure, if in fact we're going to get $3 million, I listed, and probably it's our number one priority, although you didn't really, well, maybe you did say on this one. New County EOC, $1 million. So in keeping with how you all talked about on the 20th, we would try and use the Restore money from the consortium, the consortium money for our EOC. Then the other things that I know about, sprinkler system at the Armory, and I say sprinkler system, but it might include other improvements. We need to solve that fire marshal issue, so that's $500,000. There's some land acquisition around the landfill, which I should have mentioned when Fonda was here. We're not buying land for the landfill, we're buying land to protect the buffer around the landfill. Those are something we're going to have to do eventually, and so we can get the consortium money to do that, that's fine. So that's $2 million of the $3 million. I left $1 million to be determined. Who knows what else will come out. One of the ideas I was going to mention this morning, and I don't know that you all are aware of this, the $300,000 for the lift station at the jail, apparently East Point is now going to solve that problem, and I didn't know that until Friday. But they've signed a contract to solve that problem for the lift station.
Yeah, I was informed of that 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's a great improvement in our relationship with East Point Sewer and Water. So that was what I have for infrastructure. On economic development, where you have $4.5 million, we, as you all know, we're searching for money in a variety of places for the East Point Channel. We hope the Congress funds that. We don't know if they will. We put East Point Channel and 2 Mile Channel both in under the Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund that Stella helped write a grant for. So I just list those projects under economic development because we don't know how it's going to get funded. But those projects are very important to Franklin County, so I listed those too. And then $500,000 to be determined for economic development. And then environmental restoration, we already saw this morning, we opened up bids for $438,000, and I listed $500,000 for Darrow vessel, so that actually looks like it might be a pretty accurate number. And then under environmental restoration, just a broad basic topic, Apalachicola Bay restoration of $4 million. There's no specificity to that, commissioners. If you have some ideas, I don't know that the consultants need any more information, but that's what I listed as how we would spend our $12 million out of consortium funds.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
That consortium, that comes direct to the county?
I will defer to, actually Commissioner Sanders may say it better than I can. The consortium money is going to the state of Florida, and then we get it from the state of Florida.
But is it just only for the county?
That $2 million is our county, is our money. Every county gets equal amount of money.
And do the cities supposed to get into that?
The cities are not applicants. The cities are not members of the consortium. The cities, to my knowledge, cities cannot apply to the consortium money. Now, the county may spend money in the cities, but to my knowledge, the county is a member of the consortium, and we decide how the money is spent in the county.
I wanted that straightened out before the fight comes.
Well, I'll defer to other people, because I'm not up on all the consortium stuff.
Yeah.
The Pot 3 money is actually not the counties. The only applicant is the state. And the consortium structure is to put a team lens on all of that. But ultimately, the only applicant in that regard will be the state. Hence, the state governor has to approve both the state expenditure plan and and then subsequently, the projects will always be submitted by DEP. They actually will not be submitted by any of the counties.
Okay.
Okay. Would it be okay if I actually involve myself in this conversation?
Yeah.
Because I'd actually give you some different advice for your consultants
Okay.
when they come in. Your focus, believe it or not, right now for this initial meeting is actually too focused, where you could say, an EOC or something to that effect because of your 15-year payout.
Right.
I'll tell you how some of the other counties, one that comes to mind, of course, the Escambia is not the only one, but they've packaged their statement. There's two things going on here, and certainly Commissioner Sanders knows this, and that's how not to burn up too much money on dual consultants in every arena, figuring out what it is you want to do or need to do. Certainly, a county like Escambia said that's not a problem. Bayou Chico restoration is our #1 county issue, binding the 5 commissioners together. Without dealing with those matters, they stand to lose a lot of tourism and infrastructure and economic development money down the road. They don't tell you exactly what they're going to do in Bayou Chico, because obviously it's predicated each year by the amount of money that's available and what element of a project they can actually undertake in that particular period of time, right? So I would offer to you that you may, I'm just going to openly offer that you may, because I think it would be safe to say that either in restoration or transition, Commissioner, Apalachicola, fishery, and fishery sustainability and the underlying economics behind that is certainly a feature on the environmental side. Your tributary flows, which would get into your dredge intents for some of the systems, will play into that. You don't have to feature them at this point in time. I would suggest you may just want to lead with Apalachicola Bay, and I mean that's up to you. But I'm just suggesting to you, you don't get down in the weeds with the consultant, because you have a hard time doing that, crossing a 15-year band on monies. You want something that brings it up one level higher than that in both regards. And I would make the same statement, by the way, about the EOC being in the emergency management picture. You need a highly improved emergency management infrastructure in Franklin. And if you're going to compartmentalize, and it's not a bad idea, if you can compartmentalize under the 25% threshold for infrastructure and within the threshold for the environment, you may want to just come up a notch, and then have the consultant work with you to package the preamble, the abstract around that properly, where in each funding cycle they're coming back to you and saying, okay, well, what is 2018's principal funding interest as you move either towards that EOC or as you move towards the something going on in the Bay or otherwise. Am I making sense here?
Not completely.
Because if you just if you just submit them a pick list,
Right.
it's like the last thing they want, and it's the last thing they're dealing with at the moment.
But do they have much option? This is money reserved, this is a $12 million reserve in Franklin County. Unless the governor throws out all this equal division, I mean, we are supposed to get $12 million, so I don't really see what's the harm of saying specifically what we want to do with it.
Well, I mean, I'm just suggesting to you that in the dialogue, and I don't know this to be 100% right, I'm just like, I've been in every meeting I'm just suggesting in the dialogue that the expectation, there's a couple of things that need to actually be also remembered here. The governor hasn't approved anything. The government hasn't been brought anything to approve, and frankly, inclusive of the division by 23 of the amount of money. So, having said that, the one thing that's pretty consistent in the dialogue is that the consultant and maybe the consortium as a group itself has pretty consistently believed that the framework of the state expenditure plan will be held up to a much lesser number of projects
Okay.
and more like programs.
All right, so,
Then-
okay.
You see what I'm getting at?
I guess, I see where you're going now, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I want to tell you the ideas that I thought you all were talking about. We will not have the specifics when the consortium's coming down at their expense. I mean, it's not, fortunately, these group of people have already been paid by the consortium, these consultants, so we're going to take advantage of their.
Yeah, but you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah,
I want
yeah,
you to advantage yourself in the process, because you're always going to have that secondary control over, so what goes into the slot for
Okay.
funding.
We won't have this, we won't have the same specificity with the consultants.
No, but you need to have conviction. You have conviction that you
Right.
need Apalachicola Bay dealt with, or the economics and fishery component of that, or you need to have conviction towards the emergency management structure, so that they can begin to test some of the what-ifs associated with whether they believe the criterion will ever be tested and accepted or denied, once those projects start to show themselves.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Do I understand you to say that we don't say specific project, we say maintenance of Apalachicola Bay? And don't plug in, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And we say like that emergency operations, Franklin County, we need to upgrade our emergency operations center for the benefit of the public, and just leave it at that, and promote that as an idea that, would go to the state, because other
Ideas,
counties
not
may have the
projects.
same
Okay.
issue. And so then we're trying to enhance the power of the state expenditure plan, so the governor won't throw it all out.
Well, and there are other reasons. So you're not projecting, I think, at the moment. By the way, this hasn't been run to ground, but you're elevating to a program. One of the concepts of the state expenditure plan, Pot 3, was that, if you are concerned with, let's just say on the environmental side, the Apalachicola system, okay, the Apalachicola Bay system, that might actually enjoin other counties bordering you on those regional issues, right? So they might wade in and start to have some regionalization about the emphasis on that system. That's theory, right? It was held to a much higher theory than the manner in which the state expenditure plan is being addressed now. A year ago, that was in theory. That was going to be practice. There were going to be like 6 regional projects in the framework. I just come back to the real test is, what are you convicted to focusing on? Because your projects, just like the prior discussion, aren't quite ready for showtime
Right.
to be doled out in 15-year
We're
increments.
convicted we want our share of the consortium money.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a given, and your commissioner's done a great job about that. So but now as the game moves down, I don't mean to use
So
that.
you're basically saying paint with a broader brush.
Paint with a broader brush, but again, be very convicted. All of the what-ifs, you're talking about the Supreme Court ruling and everything else associated with the Apalachicola Bay system. Well, those what-ifs could do a lot of things, or not do anything at all. And you could be left, as you say, holding a rough bag in year 5, and you need to make a full court run on some of the things in the salvage some of that industry.
So
or
as it
fishery.
pertains to the percentages that you got in there for economics and percentages you got in there for, we don't need any percentages, because we may want more money for economic development than we do environment, or vice versa.
Okay.
Well, correct. And especially getting down a scale, you don't want to get caught up in that little quagmire. You have caps that'll control that anyway.
Right.
And once you use it up, you use it up. But, ultimately,
The only cap is on the infrastructure, right?
the only cap is on the infrastructure. That's correct.
So we'll max the cap on them other 2 categories, don't put any percentages. Apalachicola Bay, and we don't know what's happening with our, if we get some jobs coming to this airport or whatever, we may want more going to one side than the other side. I mean, it just all depends. There's a lot of,
Precisely.
as we said about the 10-year, multi-year implementation plan, we don't know what the future holds.
But just as the commissioner said, you've got 98, you're featured in and around Apalachicola Bay. I mean, it's your gem, it's your feature, driving so much of the, you know, the draw here.
I mean, so Brian, what is your, I mean, do you have any sense, I mean, the consortium and the consultants are working sort of in the dark now. Have they made any overtures to the governor's office of what he's looking for?
Oh, we certainly suppose that they have, because they have Mike Stoll sitting on the, among others, but they have 2 or 3 representatives directly of the governor's office. But to this point, as Commissioner Sanders, who's in every one of those meetings, knows, it's all conjecture until you put something on paper, and you can obviously take it to their staff.
All I know, Brian, is every time we go in there, the consultants need an amendment to their contract. He can tell you. He can tell you, didn't
Yes, ma'am.
he?
And
Didn't they say last time that, well, if we do this, if you all want us to do this, you've got to understand, we need an amendment to the original contract. So I'm saying, that's what it says, so, and I mean, Brian got up a couple of times and said some stuff, so, you know, I mean,
yeah,
Well,
you
we'll be
just,
more general and more convincing.
but there's a fine art between being general and focused.
Yeah,
You can be
I understand.
general, again, I'll just use the Escambia comparison. You can be general and focused. It's Bayou Chico. And there's a few unanswered questions about the issues in Bayou Chico, but it's Bayou Chico. And so, man, I think you can take the same
Okay.
Yeah.
role.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then the last thing, I always talk about Gulf Shore Boulevard, and so.